All right, let's dive in. When you picture Maiden Castle, that huge Iron Age hill fort, its earthworks are just massive.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the iconic British sites. Absolutely dominates the landscape.
And for decades, the story attached to it has been, well, incredibly dramatic. You hear Maiden Castle, you think Romans.
A brutal Roman assault, fierce final stand, a massacre. That's the classic picture.
Exactly. And it all seemed confirmed by skeletons found back in the 1930s showing these horrific injuries. It became this powerful symbol, didn't it? A symbol of a really violent Roman conquest.
It really did. That image got cemented very early on. Sir Mortimer Wheeler's work in 1936 was just hugely influential.
He found the skeletons, right?
Dozens of them.
Right. Yeah.
And they had what he saw as undeniable marks of battle. We're talking lethal weapon injuries, head, upper body, pretty gruesome stuff.
And he interpreted that as
proof of a single fierce battle. He painted this really vivid, colorful account of a Roman legion just overwhelming the local Durotriges tribe, a massacre of its defenders, he called it.
And that story just took hold.
Completely. It became the accepted truth. Popped up in countless books, articles, TV shows. It basically marked this perceived, sudden and violent end of the Iron Age right there at the castle.
Okay, so that's the story we all kind of know. But you've brought sources about a new study that, well, it seems to challenge that entire narrative pretty fundamentally.
Yeah, it really does turn it on its head.
So our mission here is to unpack these sources. Let's look at what this new evidence is and what it actually tells us or suggests about Maiden Castle.
Exactly. Because this new research looks at those same burials Wheeler found, but argues they tell a very different story. A more complex one, maybe. It's not quite the Roman versus Briton clash we've always heard about. There's a twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start, though, by grounding ourselves in that original discovery. Tell us a bit more about Wheeler's 1936 dig. What exactly did he find that led him to that massacre conclusion?
Well, his team excavated around the eastern entrance of the hill fort. That's where they uncovered these burials. Some seemed quite haphazardly placed, actually.
Not long formal graves.
Some yes, some no. But the key thing was the individuals inside showed clear signs of violent death. Skulls smashed, severe cuts, puncture wounds consistent with weapons.
Grim stuff.
Definitely. And Wheeler saw those injuries, put them together with finding some Roman-style arrowheads nearby, and concluded, well, this must be the immediate aftermath of a Roman attack.
Yeah.
The pieces seemed to fit.
And his description of it was very powerful, almost cinematic.
Oh, absolutely. He wrote compellingly about the defenders making their last stand, the chaos, the tragic end for those who fell fighting the invaders.
Yeah, and as one of the sources, Dr. Miles Russell, I think, points out, that narrative really resonated, especially in the late 1930s.
Yes, with the political climate then, this story of a heroic, if doomed, defense against a powerful invader struck a chord. It really cemented the idea of this being a sudden and violent end of the Iron Age, around 43 AD. For a long, long time, as Russell notes, no one was really prepared to question the results.
Okay, so let's fast forward this new study we're looking at. It's from archaeologists at Bournemouth University.
That's right. Dr. Martin Smith, Dr. Miles Russell again, and Paul Cheatham.
And what do they do differently? They didn't just look at the bones again, did they?
Well, they did re-examine the skeletal remains, yes, applying modern forensic analysis to the trauma patterns. But the crucial difference, the real game changer, was conducting a fresh program of radiocarbon dating on the individuals.
Okay. Radiocarbon dating. This is where the story starts to shift, isn't it?
This is where it really unravels.
So what did the dating show? When did these people actually die?
Get this. The results were unequivocal. These individuals did not all die at the same time, not in a single event like Wheeler's battle scenario.
Not all at once.
No. Instead, the dating showed they died over a period of decades. The lethal violence, the kind that left those marks, happened sporadically. It stretches from the late 1st century BC, so before Caesar even, right through to the early 1st century AD.
Wow. So decades before the main Roman invasion under Claudius in 43 AD, not during the invasion itself.
Exactly. That's a massive time difference. We're talking maybe 50, 60 years or even more, covering that whole period.
Okay, that completely changes the context.
It absolutely does. And based on this new timeline, the researchers offer a radically different interpretation.
Which is?
They conclude these deaths weren't from one big Roman fight. Instead, they reflect a pattern of recurring bloodshed spanning a much longer time frame. Internal conflict, essentially.
Recurring bloodshed among the Britons themselves. Is that what the sources suggest? How do they get there just from the dates?
Well, the dates rule out the single Roman event in 43 AD, right? So if it wasn't that big battle against an outside enemy, what else causes repeated violent deaths over decades within the same community?
Internal strife.
That's what the sources point to. Things like local unrest, maybe executions, or power struggles within the community. You could be looking at factional fighting, disputes over resources, or maybe even formalized punishments being carried out. Britons killing Britons.
That paints a much more complicated picture of Iron Age life just before the Romans showed up. Less about unity against the invader.
And potentially more about a community dealing with its own internal violence, maybe even fracturing from within.
As Dr. Russell says in one source, pretty bluntly.
Yeah, he says, the trouble is it doesn't appear to have actually happened the way Wheeler thought. The evidence, especially with this new dating, points quite strongly towards Britons killing Britons.
And where were they buried? Was it an active fort being defended?
That's another interesting point from the study. They suggest these individuals were likely buried in what was already a long-abandoned fortification by that time, not necessarily an active hill fort under Roman siege.
So the iconic image, Romans storming the ramparts, the desperate last stand.
According to this analysis, that specific scene at Maiden Castle probably didn't happen quite like that. The Roman army certainly committed atrocities elsewhere, no doubt about that. But this particular famous instance, it seems it wasn't one of them.
The violence was real, the deaths brutal, but the who and the when, completely different.
Exactly. The culprits and the timing seem to have been misunderstood for, well, nearly a century.
This reinterpretation also opens up fascinating questions about the society itself, doesn't it? Paul Cheatham from the research team touches on this.
Yes, beyond just the dating and the violence, looking closer at the burials themselves is revealing. Cheatham points out this intermingling of differing cultural burial practices contemporaneously. Basically, different styles of burial happening at the same site, around the same time.
What could that mean? Different groups living there together.
That's one possibility. It might suggest distinct cultures living and dying together at Maiden Castle. Or, maybe even more intriguingly,
Yes.
it could point towards really complex social rules or hierarchical divisions within this Iron Age society. Maybe how you were buried or where you ended up depended on your status, your kin group, your role, even if you died violently.
So not just one homogeneous group, but maybe internal structures and divides we haven't fully grasped, especially if we only looked through the lens of us versus the Romans.
Precisely. It hints at a more complex social landscape before the conquest.
And thinking bigger picture now, this study doesn't just rewrite Maiden Castle's story. It has wider implications, right, for archaeology across the UK.
It really does. The sources emphasize that this work brings into question how other archaeological cemeteries across the UK have been interpreted, especially sites gated using older methods, or ones interpreted through these grand narratives like the Roman conquest without the benefit of modern scientific checks.
That's a wake-up call, maybe?
You could say that. It suggests that simplistic approaches to interpreting archaeological cemeteries must now be questioned. We need rigorous, modern analysis like this kind of radiocarbon dating program before jumping to conclusions based on older assumptions.
And is the Maiden Castle story even finished? Could there be more discoveries?
Very possibly. The sources point out that Wheeler, despite his huge impact, only excavated a fraction of the site. Maiden Castle is enormous. Those ramparts go on forever.
So more burials could still be out there.
It suggested that a larger number of burials remain undiscovered around the immense ramparts. Future work or new analyses could reveal even more. Who knows?
Wow. Okay, so let's just recap this deep dive then. We started with this iconic story, Maiden Castle, Roman Massacre, end of the Iron Age.
The classic Wheeler narrative.
But this new study, using modern radiocarbon dating, fundamentally challenges that. The evidence now points away from a single Roman battle in 43 AD.
And towards perhaps decades of recurring, brutal, internal conflict among the Britons themselves in the years leading up to the Roman arrival. Britons killing Britons.
It's a massive shift in understanding for such a famous site.
It really is. It underscores how new science, new techniques can completely revise even the most deeply entrenched historical narratives. It gives us a much more nuanced, maybe even darker view of pre-Roman Iron Age life than that traditional island story perhaps allowed for.
And it really hammers home the need to keep re-examining evidence, doesn't it? Even from famous digs.
Absolutely. History isn't static. Our understanding evolves as our tools get better.
So what does this mean for you listening? Well, this deep dive shows just how dynamic our understanding of the past can be. Even iconic stories can be overturned by new evidence, revealing layers of complexity we didn't see before.
And it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? If this happened at Maiden Castle, if one of Britain's most famous war cemeteries wasn't quite what we assumed for 80 years.
Then what about other sites?
Exactly. What other ancient sites, other burial grounds across the UK or even elsewhere might be holding secrets? Secrets hidden beneath layers of older interpretations, waiting for new methods, new questions to unlock them. What else don't we know about the real lives and the real conflicts of people in the distant past?